council. We hope you enjoy it and that you'll provide feedback about this year's event. The link to our online survey is available at sdvolkfestival.com, and QR codes can be found in our information tables, and there's one right back there on that table. You can help keep the festival free by making a tax-deductible donation to the South Dakota Humanities Council. To donate, visit sdhumanities.org, or use the slips available at the SDHC Information Booth in the Oscar Larson Performing Arts Center. With your gift, you can enter our drawing for a print of our festival guide cover image by Brookings artist Chuck Dennis. Donate $50 for your first entry and $10 each entry after that. This festival would not be possible without the generous support of the numerous organizations and individuals who have already donated and are acknowledged on the back cover of the festival guide. Today's program is called
Termesphere. You're looking at me, huh?
Dick Termes
Yes, Termus.
is a spearfish South Dakota artist who uses a self-divided geometric system known as six-point perspective to paint complete scenes on large spheres. These Termespheres hang in galleries and museums around the world and were displayed at the University of Rome alongside the work of one of Termes' major inspirations, M.C. Escher. Many honors include the 1999 Governor's Award for Distinction in Creative Achievement and his 2014 induction into the South Dakota Hall of Fame. Craig Volk received his MFA in playwriting and screenwriting from the Yale School of Drama and won the 2007 Penn USA Award for Best Drama for Malowski Takes the Stage. He spent 12 years working in Hollywood, including as a staffer on the Emmy Award-winning series Northern Exposure. That was really good. Volk's books include the historical biodrama A Dust Bowl of Days, 1932, and an intellectual biography of artist Dick Termes. Having completed a World War II screenplay for the Italian Film Company, he is now working on a memoir. We'll welcome our artist.
Thank you. Good. Are you just going to sit back there, or are you going to come up here, or what? You're going to leave this up to me, huh? Yes, and hold my hand. So last night, the show, everybody's going to think, here I am on Termus again. So I made him do a portrait of me in Termus style. For years and years, I've asked him to put me on one of his spheres. He finally did. I was on the bottom of one of these spheres, and I go out the next visit and I say, Dick, show me me on your sphere again. He said, I painted over you. I said, you what? You painted over me. He said, but remember, you're now the only person that's inside a sphere, which I thought was a dodge, is what I thought it was. So we've known each other, and this is also my Tesla shirt. I was in Rotterdam, and I saw the shirt, and I wore it in honor of Dick. He'll talk about tessellations later. It's an ancient Persian tessellation. Repeats. We've known each other a long, long time. We started with the South Dakota Arts Council, and the very original it was called the Sharing Company then. This was over 50 years ago, and for various crossings we've been together, I've always felt that I wanted to do a book on him. In fact, the way they describe the book, I think, is a good way to use it and to introduce it. With this book, author Craig Volk offers the first intellectual biography of Dick Termes and his art. I got to tell you, Dick and I chuckle over the word intellectual all the time. I mean, now that we and I finally got intellectual status is pretty amazing, we think. And it's focusing on the development of his Termespheres. An introduction by art critic Bill Fleming places Termes in the canon of Western art, and exquisite photos of Termespheres, they're all through the book, by Bonnie Fleming capture the unique spherical surfaces that convey Termis's artistic angle on the gentle world we live in. Okay, that's their promotional thing. The title of the book is Dick Termes, Black Hills Artist and Visionary. You know, I don't use the word visionary very lightly. I mean, yet I truly believe if I ever met somebody in my long life, that's a visionary, it would be Mr. Termes. And I thought of him, and I heard this quote by the famous American artist recently, Richard Sierra, who said, "We evaluate artists by how much they are able to rid themselves of convention to change history." That's also a visionary. And I truly believe that Dick has done that with his work for a long, long time. He stayed the course with his work. And what I'm going to do, because this is primarily a book thing, Dick is going to come up here and he's going to answer all kinds of questions. Mostly he's going to cover this. But I wanted to read to you just the prologue to the book, which is just about two and a half pages. And then I'll bring Dick up. Everyone who knows him knows this about him. He is a soft-spoken, affable man. He laughs easy and often. His fingers bow slightly inward from a lifetime of caressing his curved canvases. While pursuing his MFA, a professor queried him as to what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. For Dick, always a good question, always worth a good answer. For Dick Termes, a devoted artist who has been exploring his signature art form for over 50 years, his answer is a trail of over 400 Termespheres, a testament to the dogged work ethic along a lifelong path. When explaining his work, he inevitably begins by noting that he is playing with or playing off one of his artistic predecessors or performing a creative experiment of his own fashioning. Whether the central dynamic is geometrical or psychological or philosophical or historical or political, Termes remains a man resolute in selecting his engaging, this is a quote from him, perfect point of artistic angle, while noting that his real pursuit is to portray, another quote, the gentle world we live in. An anecdote from his acceptance speech when he was inducted into the South Dakota Hall of Fame further demonstrates his worldview. Termes related how he conducted an experiment by cutting a large globe in half and filling one hemisphere with small balls, all the same size. He motorized this basin into a circular motion, and all the balls revolved. A short time later, he was surprised to discover that the gearing of the individual balls had stopped. His curiosity piqued. He stirred the contents, and again the balls began to spin. A short time later, they again went immobile. After some speculation, he added a single smaller sized ball, stirred, engaged the power, and their turning became perpetual. His conclusion, as noted in his speech, was the need for the oddball to set things in motion, much as a revolutionary artist stirs up society, is what I think he's done. Dick Termes is a revolutionary artist. The great Russian futurist Vladimir Mayakovsky championed that you must fight for the revolution inside yourself. Termes has fought that good fight, and his is truly a revolving revolt. He is a student, an heir primarily to the design constructing of the systems theorist Buckminster Fuller and the visual cogitating of the printmaker M.C. Escher. Termes has lived his adult life housed in geodesic domes as a partial tribute to Fuller, and his body of work has prolifically expanded the ideational and fanciful investigations found in Escher. Escher's son, George, after visiting with Termes, expressed that it was as if he met the ghost of his father, and that his dad would have cherished this discussion regarding the next steps in his initial experiments. He further noted, Dick Termes is a contemporary artist who matches my father's quest in the capturing of the uncapturable visual dimensions that are fascinating to ponder. Both Escher and Termes share a rapt obsession with vanishing points and optical illusions. However, Termes is much less mathematical and much more experimental with color than his predecessor. Moreover, not being bound to the flat canvas, Termes's spherical explorations have allowed for an expansive extension of the spatial contemplation found, found in Escher's work. Bruno Ernst, the leading expert on M.C. Escher, enthusiastically recognized, when I was sent information about Termes's work, I was already stupefied. I have never realized that painting on an actual sphere would give an entirely new visual experience hereto unknown to me. Termes's vanishing points do not actually vanish. Roving over the spherical dimension, they double back to generate a duality of continuum. As for his optical illusions, they stun and reverberate. His traveling circumferences result in lines that each stretch out into a halving of every sphere he draws on. This is the terrain of Albert Einstein's curved space. Einstein said if you could see far enough, you would be able to encounter the back of your own head. With Termespheres, the viewer is compelled outward and inward along these multiple vectoring perspective avenues. Ironically, the most intriguing experience is that one doesn't merely look at a Termesphere. Instead, the beholder looks out from them, seeing the world via a vibrant and immediate shared immediacy. Termes's nutshell summary of his artistic approach reveals that perspective. This is the nutshell. A Termesphere painting is an optical illusion, an inside-out view of the total physical world around you on the outside surface of a hanging, rotating sphere. Termes captures the up and down, the all-around visual world from one revolving point in space. Most of the time, these spheres are painted on the outside, so it takes a 6-point perspective system to keep all of this environment around you organized. Complex, yet organized space. Yes, yet far beyond the nutshell is the raw wonder of each Termesphere expanding an immersive and interactive invitation. One doesn't merely view a Termesphere, one is captivated by its spinning sinuosity. Okay, that's it. That's the intro. So one of the things I was able to identify in here, I mentioned them briefly, is that there are kind of 7 subgenres of how he experiments, and they locate around the subject matter in particular. These 2, I think, are probably, I think 2 of these, yeah, there are 2 of them, right? 2 of the 7, I think. Come up here, Dick, and explain a little bit better. You know, honest to God, I worked in this book, and we sat down in his, it's a cluster of 7 geodesic domes he lives with in Spearfish, that he lives in Spearfish, and with Bill Fleming, the art critic who did it, and did the intro as well. And these 2 guys were talking, and at one point I said, I swear to God, there's smoke coming out of my ears. I could not keep up with them. And at a certain point, I could, and now I reread parts of the book and I go, God, I'm not sure I understand that anymore. So can you explain it any better than what I just did? Or what do you want to say about these 2? Let's start with these 2. What are these 2? Explain.
Well, let me start with something else.
Okay.
It'll fit right back to this. So.
All right, good.
Okay, so I want you first to imagine you have a transparent ball on your head, okay? Each one of you, just imagine there's a ball on your head, and wherever you're sitting, you're going to copy on the inside of the ball everything you see of this room around you, okay? So all of this would be over here. The ceiling would be up here. Floor would be down below you. And you just copy everything you see, okay? And once you copy it, you paint it, or however you want to do it, you take it off your head and you look at it, and that's what you see like this. So that's what 6-point perspective. Now let's just think about the 6-point perspective though, because where are these 6 points that he is so hung up on? Well, I can tell you where if I were in a sphere, and I were standing, say, up here, I could tell you where the 6 vanishing points, like if the Renaissance guys discovered 1-point perspective. And what they did was they were interested in capturing this flat place over here. And so they noticed that these lines that are parallel to each other go to a vanishing point in the center of that wall. Okay? So where is that point at? All you have to know is where your eye is located, and the closest point that your eye is to that wall is the vanishing. If I move over here, the vanishing point moves with me. If I get right up against the wall, the vanishing point is here. It really distorts this wall when you do that, when you shift around. But that's where you're located is how that works. I just finished a painting that I have the 6 vanishing points in it, but I went back to the Renaissance guys and found 6 artists that discovered perspective, 1-point perspective. Brunelleschi, there's a Francisca, there's a whole bunch of them that all of a sudden it just became aware to a whole bunch of artists that 1-point perspective was how you organize space to make it your space have depth in it. And so I picked up their paintings and put them. I did the paintings on each of the 6 sides of buildings, a room just like this. So it actually has a painting over there on that wall, has a painting over on this wall, has a painting on the floor, right below you, and one on the ceiling, and all 6 sides. And I exaggerated their points. And so if you know your art history, you can actually identify who these guys are. And so there's an exaggerated point, and they're using a 1-point perspective, and this guy is. And but what I did was created the room to put them in, so their vanishing point's right on my vanishing point, and mine just flows out from them, and it's and creates the room that they're actually hanging in. And I don't know if anybody will notice it, that their point is my point, but I used all 6 of them and created a room to put them all 6 of them in, and it all fits together. So I was listening to Craig this morning about how you create a story and how you create a book or a novel, and I was trying to think, how does that fit? What's the story? I think it has a story. That one more than a lot of my pieces do. But I was trying to tie in with writers, how they have to think about how they write and how my paintings actually happen. Because a lot of them just happen. And then later I go, I wonder what I said. And then I figure it out after like 2 or 3 weeks of looking at it. I go, oh, I think that's what it means. So I got to go, I don't think that's following the rules very well sometimes.
That part is no.
But I think we all have our way to come up with ideas. A lot of my ideas have to do with my thinking about total visual space, because if there's anything unique that I've done, it's the idea of taking a flat picture and and like, for instance, this picture here. Okay, what happens now? What happens here? What happens when you continue that and this up over the top and complete the whole picture, complete the scene? Because we don't live in a flat space like this. We live in environments, don't we, all the time? And that's what I thought when I first hit on this idea. Well, actually, many years later, I thought, so what have you done here? Well, I've taken the frames away, and it just keeps going, and you complete environments around you. And like even an environment, just like I was talking about, if we each did that painting that I was talking about at the beginning, every one of them would be different, because where you stand, you're seeing a different picture than anybody else. And a little bug flying up here would see a very different picture of what this whole world is about. So and I think I think it's a very important thing to start making people aware of complete environments rather than just, I mean, not, I don't think all artists should do what I do, absolutely not. I think they're all finding things that they're finding exciting. But for me, I feel very happy about figuring out how to capture these complete worlds and have it organized very precisely. What I mean by organized is this is the Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. And every way you look at that, it'll read accurately. That's why and especially like a cathedral or a cubicle building, that's when my 6 points really work. Is it 6 points don't work in Mother Nature very well. I mean, there's trees get smaller as they go off to infinity, but they go off to infinity in all directions. So there's zillions of points. But it's when man comes into the world and he tries to organize it, he likes the cube. And he likes to organize the cities by cubes. He likes to organize the rooms and buildings and all the stuff that goes in, the chairs and the tables, everything is cubical for us for some reason. And once you design a room to be cubicle, you have to have cubicle tables or they don't fit in the room. You have to have a cubicle couch. You have to have cubicle stoves. You have to have, everything has to be designed to fit with the big concept of the cubicle room. So then once you do that, my 6 points fit in very well. Like when I first went to, this was last year, about winter time, we took a trip to San Francisco, actually Pacifica. My son lives in Pacifica, which is just like 15 minutes from this place. And right on the ocean, which is really appealing. And so I took 15 days, went in and took this ball and sketched the drawing of the cathedral. What I do is I start by putting 6 equidistant points on the sphere, and then I look at the room where I wander around trying to find the best spot to show the most of the cathedral that I can. And then I cheat too on this a little bit because there's certain things that I like way over there and certain things I like over there that I pull it in and make it, so I make it more the cathedral than the cathedral is. It's kind of, I think in writing you do this too. I think you plush up the good stuff and make it more of an emphasis and lessen the other things that aren't quite so cool. And so I do that too. I pick out the windows that I think are the coolest, make sure they're in, because people don't know the Grace Cathedral as well as I do now. I mean, after you do a painting of it, I feel like I built it, I mean, because you have to know how everything fits together. It all, and what's interesting about 6 point perspective, if I were to draw just that little part right there, I dictate the whole piece. The whole piece is dictated with one little piece that I do. If I do one little corner, like that corner of this room, it dictates everything. It's because it's showing what, in order for that to look a certain way, you have to be in a certain place. And if I move here, that corner is going to look different when you put it in perspective. Just that little corner is dictating the whole sphere every time. So that's what I think why the math people like my work, because they love the idea that there's a system to the visual world. And when perspective came in and they organized it, and now I have to admit that 1 point perspective is not right. I have to go back and tell Brunelleschi, who discovered perspective, that unless he does it like I did it and picks out one little point on mine and see how the lines actually go curving out like that, it's not accurate, because I know this is accurate because everything fits perfect all the time. And so it's interesting when you, after you've studied, I've studied 7 years of college, an MFA and a master's and a bachelor's and stuff, and studied all kinds of other artists, other students' work, other artists' work. It's interesting when you finally feel like you hit on something, and some of those guys were not right. you know, and you have to admit that Brunelleschi is not right. He's the guy that built the Duomo. I don't know if you know, and if you go to Florence, you see that big dome in Florence. He was a jewelry maker, and he went to the city council, and they wanted somebody to put that dome up, and nobody knew how to do it at that time. And he said, "I know how to do it." And he said, "How do we? You're a jewelry guy. You don't know how to do this stuff." He says, "I've got it all figured out." They said, and they said, "Well, how would you do it?" He said, "Well, I can't tell you, or anybody could do it." And and finally, somehow he convinced them to let him do it. Well, what his concept was to put big chain links, a big chain around the dome as it goes up, and another one in the next row up, so it couldn't pull out. If a dome can't pull out, it can't fall in. And that's what he realized is that, and that was the first big dome that ever existed in the world. I mean, one that really was massive like that. So it was kind of interesting that it can come from a jewelry guy, that and a lot of jewelry people I know, I understand they're pretty sharp people. So anyway, that's what this one is, and this has a labyrinth pattern on the bottom there too. And I did move that. That's why I thought that was so cool. A labyrinth pattern. I kind of redesigned the Grace Cathedral to make sure that was right on the bottom. I wanted that to be the bottom point. I used a lot of geometry. Obviously, just to find the 6 points on the sphere is geometry, right? But this recent piece I'm working on, I just want to explain it a little bit because it's. I saw a polyhedron that had a 3, 4, 5 polygons in it. It had a triangle, it had a square, and it had a pentagon that alternated, and all the pieces were the same length. All the edges were always the same length. And I thought, okay, so how do you put that on a ball? I mean, it's one thing to take flat pieces and tape them together. You could have them be any size, whatever, as long as the edges were all the same and you knew what the order was, it would fit together and make a polyhedron. But how do you do that on a sphere? And so I wrote to a couple of my math friends and said, so how do you know what the length of that little thing is, the edge of those, on a 22-inch ball like this? And I didn't get any answers from anybody. And like normal, I started playing with my compass and my ruler is a flexible ruler, and started mapping out. And this polyhedron is called a rhombic icosahedron. So, and I know my icosahedrons and dodecahedrons very well. So I thought, okay, it probably has something to do with those two. And when you put a dodecahedron, which is 12 pentagons on a ball, and I know how to do that, I have it come out of the icosahedron, which is 20 equilateral triangles that fit on a ball. I got that on the ball, and then I started looking at the overlapping of those two polyhedron, and I saw a cross, a nice 90-degree cross in there, and I counted the number of those. It was the right number for the cubes or the squares. So I thought, okay, if I can put the right size square in there and it comes out to where the squares actually end up touching corner to corner, then I've got what I need. So I just trial and error until all of a sudden the points hit together. And so I can't like if I had a math class, I wouldn't be able to tell them, or a geometry class, how I did it. It's sort of like, okay, the points are hitting, it's perfect. And everything was like within a 16th of an inch proper, right? So I got that down. Now I have to figure out, well, what am I going to do with it? And I'm doing a new piece. It's a Black Hills and Native Americans in Black Hills before the white guys actually arrived. So it's kind of 1876 before that, and which is really delightful because it's all the really cool characters, the native people, and but I want it to fit into that geometry too. See, so it's the nature of the Black Hills, and this is I'm just thinking about this right now. The nature of the hills. I've got the native people, all these cool things that are happening, and they have to lock into the and I was going, okay, there's the four directions of space. There's the up and down, the sky and the earth, the native thinking of Black Elk. I've been reading a lot of Black Elk. And so there's my 6 points, see, so I can actually tie my 6-point perspective into this Black Hills native sort of thing. If I use the roads going off to east, west, north, east, west, south, and the sky and the land, and all of that can be tied into this piece. And then, but then I thought, yeah, but my geometry, and and I don't know, that geometry just kind of popped into my head right ahead of this commission. So I was talking to Craig. I said, so how how do you justify having this fit? Well, after I got to playing with it, the polyhedron that I built actually has 6 squares equal distance from each other. I didn't know that it was even going to happen with it. So I thought, okay, the six is there already. Now I just have to figure out why the rest of it fits. So in a way, my subject matter is Black Hills, Native Americans, and this geometry. Those three have to somehow learn to live together. and it's an odd way to work, but it's interesting because I just I played with the sphere for 50 years, over 50 years now, and it's that kind of approach is how I approach all my pieces. So I want when I was at the University of Wyoming, one of my best classes was Victor Flack, and he was hated by everybody. Nobody wanted to take a class from this guy. And I took a class from him, and I fought with him all the way through the class. I thought, "Oh, he's just horrible guy." I got to the end of the class, and I thought, where have you learned the most from? And the professors, which professors have taught you the most? Him. He, even though he was a really terrible person in a class. I mean, just tore people apart. But he had so many solid ideas. And so I went to him second semester and I said, I'm going to take two different classes from you this next semester. He says, oh no, don't do that. take classes from these people that you understand better than I do or like better than I do. I said, no, I've analyzed what's going on here. And I think I've learned more from you than I've learned from anybody else ever. And he was really overjoyed to hear that, of course, because he never got complimented. But it's interesting in life how you run into those people that actually you just almost hate them, but they teach you so much stuff. And if you can learn to back off your head, I've tried to teach this to both of my boys. If you run into those people and you're learning a bunch of stuff, put up with them a while. Figure out how to get along with them, get the knowledge that you need, and then go on. And boy, he was just um, a Jim Dandy for trying to get along with. But he actually became a pretty good friend of mine after a while, because he he knew that I did respect him, and he needed that. He needed that respect. But if he didn't get it, he would just stand up there. Here's how he'd come into class. He'd bring this is back in the late 60s. He'd bring in a big recorder. And it was a reel-to-reel recorder. Is that right? You'd have a reel-to-reel recorder, and he'd set that all up, and then he'd stand there and he'd look at the class. So we're all required people to be there the first round, and all masters people. And he'd say, "Are you all ready to start this class?" And then he'd go push the button and record the class. Every class he did that in, because he thought at one point he said, this is probably the most important information in the arts that's actually being created today. is in this classroom. And it's like his ego. Well, it wasn't like the rest of us going, but it made, when you talked to him in class, it made you really, uh, now, is this important enough to get recorded? What I'm about to ask or what I'm going to say? So it made the class actually brought it up a level or two, which is really interesting. But so it was interesting. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about this other one. This piece I did trying to explain the perspective. So it's interesting in a way so right here, this of course is 6-point perspective. It's a complete room, everything above you, everything below you is in the picture, in the north, east, southwest, back to north, around you. So this artist on a flat canvas is doing a 1-point perspective. So its subject matter is about like that in this. So that's that, and what this shows is how much space each point of perspective gives you. When you do 2-point, see what 2-point is this way. This guy is where is 2-point is there. And they're getting about 90 degrees of the environment. So it's like from east to south is that amount of space of the complete 360 degrees. So he's getting 90 degrees of space in a 2-point perspective, which I've never seen in a book. The idea of the 2-point perspective is 1/4 of the visual space around you, which is the sphere tells you that. It's definitely, that's what it is. And then 3-point, which is this way, is a point below your feet. So it's a point down here and this point to that point in this room. So that's how much, and it's a triangular space. And you don't see that in most in books either, that when you do 3-point perspective, your canvas should be a triangle. If you go beyond the triangle, it's distorted. I always call it distortion land out there if you don't actually keep track of that. So that's what that person's doing. He's getting everything from below in a north to east direction in it. 4-point, there's 2 different 4-points. 4-point is like 2 3-points stuck together. So you get the point below your feet, and you get a point like that one and this one, and then a point above your head. So it goes like this. It would be one of the 4-point perspectives. And you can do that any way you want. I mean, any 4 points you gather together, you'll have a 4-point perspective. So when you're in here, the points, of course, are very obvious. In the middle of the walls, the closest point between me and that wall is a point, that one, this one, down here, and so on. And so you pick any of those, you got a 4-point perspective. So it can be a lot of variation. Another 4-point is the panoramic. Your phones all do this, where you can do a panoramic and turn in a circle and it stitches it all together. Lay that out sometime and put a grid into it. It's exactly what the grid is that I'm using there. I was quite surprised when I actually took a panoramic. I did panoramics back in the days when you just stuck them together, pictures. But then if you actually analyze, draw the lines and continue it, you get a grid out of it that's a very precise grid that you can actually take the grid and go backwards and get a really cool drawing in 4-point perspective. I call it continuous 4-point perspective. So that I discovered the grids by laying lines on these lines and seeing where they go to the vanishing points. Pretty soon you have which ties into the geometry math people. You have a system that the visual world actually has to play by. It's the rules of the visual world, you might say. And 5-point is like a fisheye lens. That's this guy here. And it's like a circle with a distorted half of a visual world in it. But if you take your fisheye lens camera and you analyze the grid on a 5-point perspective, it actually is a grid that goes to the center, and then it's lines that curve across, that go across up to a circle around the edge, and then the reverse of that going to a circle on this edge and that edge. That's what a fisheye lens has been doing for years too, if you're into photography. And then the 6-point is this. So, and I just might explain that a little bit. So, if you, because Craig explains that really well in the book, I think, where you have a 5-point like that, and then I actually was in a class at Wyoming. No, I was at yeah, it must have been at Wyoming because that's where it all started. And I went to Otis Art Institute in Los Angeles for 2 more years, so I was able to just play with this concept and see where it would take me. So I ended up with like 3 years of just really getting to study how the sphere worked, which is really what a plus for school. But what happened was I did this drawing in at Wyoming, and it was a fisheye lens, basically, drawing of a room. And one of the kids told me, he said, "Boy, that really looks like a sphere, doesn't it?" And I thought, a sphere? Okay, so I'm getting 5-point perspective here. That point out there, and these lines are projecting back around me. If it was on a sphere, the back point would be where these lines, all of these lines would go to, would be right back behind me. And so I went and grabbed a little kid's ball at the store and started painting. I was an oil painter at the time. So it was kind of hard because I painted on it. And it took 2 weeks before I could turn the dang ball over to find out how it would work on the other side. So so anyway, I finally got that done. And I realized, hey, that's what I needed, that back point. But I had, in order to do that, just like both of these, I had to imagine I was on inside the ball when I was doing it. So I was painting on the outside, but I was imagining I was on the inside. So in other words, this has to curve around me like this, and keep that in your head all the time. So as it curves around and you're turning in a circle, you see you go from north to east to south, and then the south line, the points, the lines that are going to the south should all run to the north. You're standing in the middle of a railroad track, okay? Here we are, railroad tracks going off to infinity back here. You're over in Belfouche. I did this in Belfouche. I took a video of it. So there's a vanishing point off to the distance there. But as you follow those parallel lines, turn around, they go off to a vanishing point behind you, okay? So, and then there's a road. I'm standing in the middle of a road too that crosses the railroad track. It goes off to infinity over here to a point. That big road gets bigger, parallel lines go off to a point back there. 4-point perspective already. Okay, where's the 6, 5 and 6? There's poles, there's telephone poles along the side over here. Telephone poles. Look at the poles. They go right above your head. They go right below your feet. They project to those 2 points. That's 5 and 6 points. That's the simplicity of it. That's how simple it works. And so that's, if I can keep that order on the sphere and organize the painting to do that, it all just fits perfect. Yes. Okay.
Well, I think we're out of time, are we?
Are we out of
Yes.
time? Did I eat up all the time?
Yes. 1 more minute. Any quick questions? You can answer questions afterwards as well. We'll
Sure.
be around a little bit if anybody wants.
This guy? I don't know, probably 3 months. That's the trouble. I worked, I have to analyze and break it down and what it is that I'm doing. And I don't even know if I knew I was doing that in the beginning. That's another thing that Craig taught me. Maybe I need to think more about what the conclusion is. like he made the statement this morning, that until you know the climax.
Alice Walker, when I know my ending, that's when I begin.
Yeah, if you have to know your ending before then you begin. And I always, a lot of times I get to the end, I go, oh, that's what I was doing. That's not doing it right. So you must intuitively be able to know there's something there that is happening too. Yes.
Yes,
Well, and then you
Then
should
claim
start.
it. Then
Then I
claim
should
it.
redo another one, right?
Right. No.
Well, I think we added two, but all the time as we're doing it. I mean.